if we put ourselves in the CEO and the CFO shoes as an example, and every year we come back to them and say, hey, I need more money for this and I need more money for that. And even if they give you all these investments all the time, and at some point they're going to come and ask, how much enough is good enough? And I think this is kind of where we need to figure out, and that good enough may change, right, from time to time. But same thing as the military, right? How much do we spend on defense and how much is good enough? I think that's the same thought process, the same mindset of working with the business, partnering, enabling, helping to make risk decisions and decide what is good enough.
Hello and welcome to Secrets of AppSec Champions. My name is Chris Lindsay, and today we're talking with Yaron Levy. Today's conversation is going to be around working with your CISO. Yaron is a CISO at Dolby Labs. Yaron, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Chris. Glad to be here. Thank you. So my name is Yaron Levy. I'm the CISO at Dolby Labs. Been here with the company for about 3.5 years now. Been practicing security for over 15. Done a bunch of different things in the industry, from e-commerce to financial services to healthcare, now entertainment. So different perspectives, and within that, as part of security, also everything from GRC to incident response to application security to security architecture to cloud security. So love this industry, having fun. It's great people, to collaborate and work with, and always learning. So glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here. So today's conversation is going to be working with your CISO, which, being a CISO, I think we're talking to the right guy. One thing that I wanted to bring up is, a little bit more on the role of a CISO. You're dealing with a lot of the stuff at a security level, right? You're dealing with the developers, the networking, the policy making, and others. But one thing that I haven't actually mentioned is either the regulators or even the executive, the CEO, the C-suites, the board of directors. Can you share a little bit of what your CISO role, not for where you're at now, but a typical CISO, how that how you would play in that space?
So I think, when you think about the role of a CISO, it's a relatively young profession. We have only been doing it for 20-ish years. And we don't really have a standard, for security. We have a lot of frameworks, we had a lot of opinions, but I don't think there's one standard I can point to and say, hey, everybody kind of practice the same. Mm-hmm. Right. If you're in the financial space, let's say take the CFO, take the finance department, they have the GAAP rules, the generally accepted accounting practices. And for the most part, everybody kind of follow the same GAAP rules. And if you ask two CFOs how you run your finance department, you're probably going to get 80% the same answer, and maybe there are 20% differences, right? You take two CISOs and ask, hey, how do you run security? You're going to get completely two different answers, right? So I think this is still evolve. As a profession, and kind of what we do with that. I think also organizations, many of them are still not exactly sure what they want from their CISO, and what that role is and where should it be. We're seeing CISOs reporting to CIOs for the most part. That has been kind of more traditional reporting. Some report to general counsel, some report through finance, some report through different places, some report directly to the CEO. I think we'll start seeing some changes, but for the most part, I think the role has been viewed predominantly as a technology role or part of IT. I think when I think about CISO role in general, CISOs for me, they're advisors. They're advisors to the business of how to enable the business and how to help the business take and manage risk, but providing that, providing the security expertise from that, and what does that mean for them? Now, when it's talk about security, it's also include like regulatory, and things like that. So, not being compliant with the law, it's a form of risk or a threat to your organization, right? Because the regulators can shut you down, they can fine you, they can do a bunch of different things. So, that's another risk that you have to consider and you have to manage, right? As you build something or deliver your service. The other thing is, again, there are many risks, and there's never going to be perfection. There's always going to be something that some kind of level of exposure, and even more than that, businesses must take risks in order to advance, to work to deliver their mission. The question is, like, how do we help the businesses to take risks responsibly, and also help the business to reduce risk that is not necessary?
Right.
So I think, a lot of it is, as we talked about the foundations before, right? Help the organization build the foundation such that they can operate and deliver the mission, take the risks, and so on, but having those foundational protections in place. On top of that, governance, risk, and compliance, we have to deal with that because it's not just the compliance side of things, but also managing the risk and putting the governance in place, policies or whatnot. And if the governance, risk, and compliance will help the organization to assume risk or to take more risk as needed for the business, on the flip side of that, we have the whole defense posture, which is essentially how do we proactively reduce risks? Vulnerability scanning, incident response, application security. All that side of defense is helping us to reduce unnecessary risk. And then, on top of that, there's a culture, because at the end of the day, everybody has part of the security program. And, like we said before, if you're a developer, I expect you to know, what OWASP Top 10 is. Maybe you don't need to know exactly the whole network segmentation and routing protocols. Okay, it's good if you do, but, OWASP Top 10 for sure you need to know, right? And then also community. And I think this is, probably the best thing we have in this security, that we have that community. We have the people we can share. We have the people we can learn from. And I think we need to build those communities inside the organization, as well as communities outside of the organization that we can share, collaborate, and share that knowledge. And when we think about all of that, is really how do you build the relationships? How do you work across the organization at all levels? From executive management, down to to the frontline engineers and employees, and really again help them. You're there to help and enable the business, help the business take risk, help the business reduce risk, and at the end of the day, you really help the business to help make decisions about how much is good enough.
Right.
Because like I said, there's never going to be 100%, right? You don't want to be in a position that you're ignoring completely and you're being negligent, right? So you want to find, okay, what are the foundation, the things that we have to do, and then build that or manage the risk to a level that the organization can manage and make sense. And as long as you are thoughtful about it and intentional about it and pragmatic about it, then you can make a decision how much for your organization is good enough. I felt I had a duty to come and communicate, contribute back to my community. So that was great. That was a great mission to come and build the practice and improve the practice. And I did that for nearly 5 years. And after that, I decided I want to do something a little bit different. And a friend of a friend, who was this former CISO at Dolby, decided to leave. And our mutual friend say, hey, is anybody wants to throw their name in the hat? So I did throw my name in the hat. And, after a long process of interviewing, and, I was selected, luckily. So here I am right now. It's a lot of fun. I started at the beginning. I started in the middle of the pandemic, which was really interesting because all the interviews I had were like this. I didn't meet anybody face to face, with the exception of my former boss, who actually flew to Kansas City to meet with me. And he said I cannot hire a CISO, without seeing them face to face. So he got a special approval from the company to travel. We met at the old Kansas City airport for about half an hour, both sitting with masks and a little bit distant from each other. Had a conversation, and then he flew back. And I joined the company in January of 21, and the first time I saw somebody face to face was October. So 10 months was like all like this. So that's in a nutshell. But I guess I never imagined that, this is where I'm going to get to or how things are going to evolve. But I love every minute, and I'm considering myself very, very blessed. To have that journey and have those experiences.
That's incredible. Well, and when you think about the fact that you're starting in the middle of a pandemic, in a position where normally we'd all be together, we'd all be in the same building or the same complex where we would be seeing the guys that work for us, sitting at the desks, starting, this role where you're not in the same city as your colleagues. They're actually scattered. And so, being a CISO in this environment is so different than being a CISO prior to the pandemic.
Oh,
with
completely.
everybody spread around and out, the risks, the threats are quite a bit different, I would imagine.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think first and foremost is, and that was frankly my biggest concern coming into the role, is how do you build relationships remotely like that? Because we don't have, and nobody had at that time, hey, let's go to lunch or let's have coffee or, do something together. When we are in the office, we can do it from time to time. You walk around, you fall on somebody's cube and like, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? Things like that, right? We did not have that opportunity. And frankly, I mean, that was one of my concerns, like how do I do that? I think it worked very, very well, I think because of two reasons. One is the culture of the company, which is fantastic. People are very collaborative, very open. So it's great. It's really great to work with, and they embraced me. I mean, for that. So for that, I'm very grateful. And the second thing is you have to be very intentional about it. You have to spend the time. You have to reach out. You have to spend time with people, and not just I need something or we have a meeting because we have to talk about something about work, but really reach out and build relationships and build trust. How can I help you? What can I do for you? Tell me more about what you do. I mean, things like that. And again, it's possible. It may not be as easy, but if you do it with intention, I think you can be very, very successful.
Right. And that's what I was just thinking is you have to be very intentional about the reach out. But the thing is you're talking about reaching out. The other thing too is people within the company need to reach in, and you have multiple different, groups and areas for security that fall under you. The role of a CISO, for those who aren't familiar with, they're doing the networking, they're doing the policies, they're doing the software side, the AppSec, they're doing every aspect, including probably physical entry into the buildings type work. One thing that you might be a regular developer that's working on a development team, and you might have a finding, and it might be the weekend, or it might be a time where you just can't reach your boss, but it's something so serious, such as a potential compromise that you're seeing. And, one thing that I wanted to bring up, and Yaron and I had talked previously, it's okay to reach out to your CISO. It's okay to, if you see something, say something.
Absolutely, 100%. And I know some people like, well, I don't want to bother, or I don't want to. My preference is like I'm on. Let's err on the side of like over communication, right? So worst case scenario, okay, nothing happened. We met somebody new, we learned something. I mean, I appreciate that collaboration. Yes, we do a lot of things that we have to deal with. By no means I don't consider myself the most top expert in the team on everything. My team definitely, I mean, have the knowledge, the experiences, and people have specific expertise. And nobody in security. I mean, security is so vast, nobody can know everything. But I think our ability overall to work together as a team, to collaborate, to support each other, each one of us is kind of bringing something unique to the table. We all the sum is greater from its parts. So definitely collaborate, definitely communicate, reach out.
Being in the role of CISO is great because now you see the whole picture, you see everything. So when you're looking at the whole picture, you're seeing the developers, they're writing API endpoints, they're writing things that receive and send data. And you're also looking at and asking the question, what if that gets compromised? What can happen? What's the worst thing? And you start looking at the east to west, the north to south compromise, to be able to move laterally, within, a network environment. And being the CISO, you see all that. You can pick out, wait a second, this doesn't smell right, or, little things. And so, being in the role that you're at, the CISO is a very critical role because they come up through the networking or through the software, but they really have a good vision of every aspect of security. And they also have the right people below them and working with them in conjunction together, that collaboration, even all the way down to the developer side. There's paths for everything. And it really adds a very secure mix. I'd like to talk about the evolution of software development. Right now, AI is huge. People are talking about AI. What do you think about all this new AI stuff that's coming out?
Well, like anything else, it's a new technology. We're relatively early ish, in our journey, right? It reminds me the times of, I don't know, 2008, 2009, 10 era, where cloud started to become a thing. AWS started around 2006, but around 8 or 9, I mean, this is kind of where, okay, people start to adopt it and start to play with it, and it start to come out, kind of similar to how AI came out. But AI came out obviously faster, and it's kind of hitting us fast and hard. And I remember conversations, from that time that people said, well, there's no way I will ever move my data to the cloud, or it's somebody else's data center, or, I will never going to use it, and things like that, right? Um, and I think, I see similarities in AI today. Oh, we are using it or we're not using it, right? So you always this spectrum of opinions from, hell no, we're never going to use this, it's going to be the end all be all, that's going to destroy humanity, to, oh, actually, you know what, it's the next big thing, better than sliced bread. So I think, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Relatively, it's still early. I'm still, we probably can't imagine yet the practical applications and what opportunities that's going to create. Cloud, it's not just a different data center, it's a whole business model that was created. If you think about SaaS companies, different apps, DevOps, right? I mean, a lot of things that were created were a result of this whole as a service model, right? And that allowed us to scale, allowed us to innovate. We created a lot of value from business perspective, and we created some problems, and we also created some new risks. So, like everything else, we have to look at the technology, we have to look at the opportunity, we have to consider the risks, and we have to decide what trade-offs we're willing to live with. There are going to be some things that, AI is going to be great for us, and you can use a lot of that capability, a lot of those capabilities, I mean, to accelerate, I mean, to do a bunch of different things. Flip side, if you are concerned about data loss, if you're Coca-Cola, you're probably not going to put your Coca-Cola secret sauce, in there, right?
Right.
So again, these are trade-offs. You kind of have to make a decision what's right for your business and how to leverage that.
Well, and with AI, it's now adding complexity to the software development side. Well, it's really adding complexity across the whole spectrum. I mean, if you think about the new AI ethical hacking tools, these tools are developed for, pen testers internally to be able to test against systems, to be able to find weaknesses in the network, to be able to do things. And one of the jokes that I talk about in regards to this AI ethical, quote unquote, ethical hacking tools is, basically a quote from Maverick, the movie, Top Gun. It's the pilot in the box. When you look at the ethical hacking tools, it's really the person at the keyboard, because what makes it ethical versus not ethical?
It's a matter of permission and perspective, right? So, like you said, I mean, every tool can be used for good and can be used for bad. And I think there are definitely some ways that we can leverage those things to, better productivity, acceleration, innovation, create a bunch of different things. And at the same time, the bad guys are going to use it for bad things. So, like everything else, I think we're going to evolve. Cloud security wasn't much of a thing back in 2008, 2009. Now it's a practice. We have tools. We have processes about how to leverage and how to use it. So I think, again, we're going to evolve. We're going to learn. There are going to be bumps along the way. Hopefully, they're not going to be too disastrous. But it's part of evolution, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really with security, it's always a question of when, not if. And, when we're trying to do our best and kick that can down the road, that's the best we can do. And, there are trade-offs. And you bring up a good point because everything evolves. 2 years ago, I would sit in front of a whole bunch of CISOs and I would always ask this question. And it was funny because the room would always get dead silent. But my question was, technology is moving at such a quick, fast pace that you have kids that can actually do things today with the scripts that they can go find, and just they have time, lots of time, and they're just hitting and doing things just because they can. And so these kids are just attacking things right and left. What are you trying to do within your companies to stay ahead of this curve? And this question was before AI was really kind of known as it is today. And again, that question's so relevant. And again, it would be one of those things where, if I were in the room, I would ask the same question. But the difference is, okay, now with AI and all these automations and the speed, the lightning speed I can go attack with full automation, I just go set it off and just walk away and come back a couple hours later, and I'll have stuff that I can start digging in and having a little fun.
Yeah, that's true. And again, there are no risks and there are no threats. But at the same time, I think we also need to be practical. And if we think about, a lot of if we look at, the last, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. For the most part, by and large, if you think about a lot of the breaches, even like, mega breaches we had, mm-hmm. At the end of the day, they all kind of came to the same thing. Exposed credentials, misconfigurations, some vulnerabilities, right? So, we kind of have to, sometimes, we tend to run after the new shiny object and the new shiny thing or whatever. But there are so many fundamental things that we have to do. And those fundamentals are not easy. And sometimes, we don't do them because of, whatever reasons. But for the most part, I think if we're going to focus on those fundamentals and make sure those fundamentals are being done right, we're going to be 80% there.
Right.
Look, even if you look like I said, many breaches, none of them are really sophisticated. I mean, I'll give you Stuxnet was sophisticated. But how many Stuxnet we had, right? SolarWinds, you can say, okay, was also sophisticated. But even if you take something like MITRE ATT&CK Framework, and what MITRE did over there, it's not the end all be all. But for the most part, these are the most common methods that have been observed and been used. So start there. Focus on those first, right? So that's kind of where I think, we need to evolve and do better in the sense of, okay, yeah, we know there's no longer a perimeter or just one perimeter. That's one thing. I don't necessarily think that, one security team can solve everything for everybody. That doesn't scale either. So how do we empower? How do we train? How do we work, with the rest of the community to make sure that everybody is doing their own little thing or whatever they're responsible for, and basically kind of get like, the economies of scale, right? So for example, you're a software developer. I expect you to know OWASP top 10 if you're developing a web application. I expect you to know CVE top 25. And for the most part, I mean, if we look at, software deployment and, vulnerabilities or whatnot, 80-90% of the vulnerabilities are OWASP top 10 on the website and on CVE top 25. That's it.
Unfortunately, right? You're right. You're absolutely right.
It's not that complicated, I don't think. We just need to be willing to do that.
Well, and when software developers go to school, they're not teaching security. I mean, you're starting to see classes now popping up, or they're doing a semester, or at least throwing a little bit in. But you're right. How many people can you ask? Give me the OWASP top 10 right now. And when you have somebody that's coming in as an intern over the summer, or an entry-level developer, you don't really expect them to really have that background. You would hope they would have it, but you don't expect it. And this is part of the problem that we face today is, I call it notepad inheritance, where they take some code. It could have problems. It may have SQL injection. It could have command injection, a lot of things, potentials. And they just copy and clone that code from one method to another to do something new. And that's where your software architects really should be more engaged with the security, because your software architects, being the leaders of the development team and that project, should be able to be more and more security focused. Those guys absolutely need to understand, here are the security vulnerabilities. Here's my threat modeling, because if they're not doing threat modeling and working with the security team and understanding the threat model with their own applications, you've got bigger problems at that point. And then they can mentor down to the junior guys. Hey, welcome to development. I know you're brand new. You just graduated, just recently. Hey, let's sit down. Let's talk about secure programming practices, coding practices, and really kind of help you get to that next level.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, software security vulnerability is not different than any software defect. It's just a different type, but it's the exact same thing. And the same way that you manage your technical debt within your software application, you cannot do the same with security. I don't see that as something that is magical or special or anything like that. The only thing is understanding what the risks are, what the threats are, to your point. Start with threat modeling, and I think this is an art that is not being taught and practiced enough as part of software design. But yeah, do your threat modeling. We're always gonna have vulnerabilities because of many different reasons. I mean, coding practices, what have you.
Stuff sneaking through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Technologies, part with technologies, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, etc. So yeah, I mean, continuously we have to monitor for those. And when we come across something and we check and see, okay, what the risks that we have with that, and make those decisions. And sometimes, I mean, we'll have to prioritize maybe some of the business functionality, and sometimes we have to prioritize the defect resolution. And as long as we find the right balance, for the most part, we should be okay.
Well, and one thing that you guys can well, not you, I mean, because I know you guys are doing amazing work, but the industry, right? The developers, the security, is bug bounties. I mean, think about the benefits that bug bounties bring. Have you been or worked with a bug bounty program previously?
We have an open public disclosure policies and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think every time you get an opportunity and things are being found, there's an opportunity for you to become better. As long as you plan for it, and as long as you can manage it properly, and you are staffed, to deal with that. Sure, I mean, you can find a lot of interesting things. Yes, there's also a lot of noise that kind of hitting you. But for the most part, I don't know, call it like a free pen test.
Exactly. And when you can take those 12 and 14-year-olds, that have all this free time that are experiencing and learning, and the kids, I call it the Minecraft generation, where they have so much time that they're just sitting there digging and digging and digging, and that's what Minecraft is all about, is digging and finding things and building things. To be able to take that energy and pen test and hack and go against things and try to find something. And when they do, you're right, the new disclosure laws and the things that companies are doing make it effective, gives you the ability to say, you know what, you went against our production environment, you didn't get anything serious, but disclose it to us. We appreciate it, because in the old days, companies would get very upset, very, very upset when somebody did something. And instead of taking the information and saying, please share with us, they send litigation paperwork their way. And that's just never any good.
Well, I think, we have new and better platforms these days in the industry to do that. If you just kind of even walk down the street and just try to open every neighbor's door and see if you can get in or not, they're going to be pretty upset, right? I mean, so probably don't do that. But I mean, if there is a platform out there that will allow you, or actually invite you to go and say, yes, come and check us out and tell us, how we do. And you do that responsibly, because a lot of those systems have not just sensitive information, but it can have impact on, people, functionality, or whatnot. Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you want to know when you have vulnerabilities and problems. On the other hand, you don't want to be down because, everybody can just kind of bring you down all the time. So there are responsible ways to do that, and not just kind of for showing and, kind of making a point, right? And yeah, I mean, and that's helpful. That's helpful, I think, is overall, contributing, and that's also compensating like the researchers. But yeah, I agree. I think it's better these days that we have platforms to do that in a responsible manner. And as long as it's responsible and people work together, it's usually okay.
So any of the companies or team leads that are listening to this, think about setting up an environment that you can use for bug bounties. There's groups called Bug Crowd and other groups that are out there that are out just trying to help you be better. And by setting this environment up, it gives you the ability to have people test against it with, as Jeroen and I were talking, without any downstream bad effects, no DOS attacks against you or anything that could be accidental. So I want to change topics slightly. So, one way that you can really build good collaboration and communication is tabletop exercises. And the value that those bring is huge, because when you do have an event and you've done your tabletop exercises, instead of the initial shock and awe of, wait a second, something bad has started or something bad is going on, what do we do? Now it's actually a matter of, okay, we've identified this event is now going on, a ransomware or some event, some adverse event, and let's hit the ground running. Let's deal with it. The difference is between your house being completely burnt down or maybe a room burns down instead of the whole thing.
Yeah, and we are doing those always in different places, right? So if you live here in the Midwest, we have tornadoes. So we have tornado drills, whether you are at school or with the kids or whether at work, but from time to time we do tornado drills. Or we have building evacuation because fire drills or whatever the case may be. This is how the military trains, right? You're running drills over and over and over again, because when the real thing happens, people rarely rise to the occasion. They sink back to their training and into their instincts. And I think the reason that we are training so much is because that's how you build that instinct. That's how you build that muscle memory, then such that you don't have to even think when you need to react to those types of situations. And, security is no different. You definitely don't want to deal with a breach the first time it ever happens. The reason that, I think a lot of people, make bad decisions, it's because usually it's under panic. And what is panic? Panic is where you're faced with a situation and how you don't have the program up here to tell you what to do.
Right.
Are you going to run or are you going to stay and fight? Right. But if you practice and you train and you simulate, those scenarios, then yes, you kind of build that muscle memory and that knowledge, inside, and then you can react much, much better. Same thing is hey, you don't take a pilot and you just send them to read a book, and after that read a book, take off with a plane full of passengers. That's probably not going to end well. No. But you train them a lot on different things, and even when they are trained, there are ways for them to gain enough hours and practice before they get completely loose. Running a simulator, and then you can crash, quote unquote, crash the simulator 100 times, but then learn from each one of those times. So when the real thing when happening, they know how to deal with it. So I'm a big believer in simulations, tabletops, what have you. And over the years, I've seen a lot of good value coming out of that for the security teams.
One of the tabletops that I've run in the past, we actually only let 2 or 3 people know that we were doing it. The director of support, the director of the networking director, and of course the CISO. And what we essentially did is we just called the support desk. We actually set up a whole new environment and we mimicked a ransomware attack. We didn't actually kick one off, but we mimicked it. And it was one of the not normal ransomware type variants that were out there. And what we did is we just had somebody act like the customer and called support and said, hey, I'm seeing this weird oddity. Can you help me? And what we learned was the amount of time. And when you did that, when we did that event, we had a stopwatch. We clicked the button. We started counting. And by the time we got to the right group and actually identified what was going on and where we should have been, the whole place was basically gone. And had we actually had real ransomware event, it was terrible. But we learned a lot from it. We learned where the mistakes were. We learned where a lot of the hiccups were. We learned, from the time that the support person, started getting the phone call and the paths that they went down, we identified deficiencies within our own documentation. And so we were able to, beef it up and talk about it. And the next time we did this random event, we had multiple shifts, daytime, nighttime. we kicked it off again after a couple of months, and we did the same event, but slightly different. That way it wasn't the same scenario, but we called the night shift people. And we said, hey, we're kicking this, I'm a customer. I'm seeing this weird thing. My files show that they're encrypted. What do you know? And by the time it got to the right people and the right people did the right thing, it was, kind of my analogy earlier, it was just a small footprint of what would have been affected versus the whole environment being taken down.
Yeah, 100%. And, Mike Tyson, right, who was a boxer, once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think, by doing those exercises and simulations, you can actually test all of your assumptions. And actually, through real life simulations, see, okay, is our response enough? Is our response time is enough, right? And all of that. So, yes, we make a lot of assumptions when we plan and build things. It's kind of the nature of the beast. I mean, you don't really kind of have much choice because you don't have all the information. But now when you test it and you see how it operates in real life, like I say, okay, well, we need to make some adjustments here and there. And I think those simulations give you like great empirical data that help you to make those decisions.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Sure.
What is the best advice that somebody has ever given you regarding security?
Oh, wow. I guess that you're always a noob and never stop learning. Because, the things, the field has changed so much and there's so much to learn and to know. I don't think there's anybody who is an expert per se, if you will. And as long as you keep learning and keep yourself, up to date on what's going on, by talking to people, by teaching others, by collaborating, going to those conferences you mentioned, like B-Sides, OWASP, places like that. Great places, to go and collaborate and learn. Never stop learning because otherwise you're going to get stale. So that's what I'm finding like really helpful.
That's rock solid right there. Really, that if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. I hate to ask this, but what's the worst advice you've been given?
The worst
It'll be
advice.
okay. Just go home. It's 5:00. It's good. Just
the worst advice. I think the worst advice was I don't know if it's advice, but like it was a perception perhaps by somebody I ran into throughout my career that security is really kind of the police, the enforcer. And everybody has to go through security and we have to approve and and bless everything, and that's not right. It's not right because first of all we can scale, and the second thing is that our job is not to go around and punish people who kind of misbehave. That's not our role, right? We are kind of more like the military, not the police, if it makes sense. So our goal, the reason that we can sit here and have a conversation in relatively safe environment and whatnot, because there are a lot of service members, who defend this country, who defend this so from external adversaries, such that we can sit and have this peaceful and safe conversation. Security, in my mind, is kind of a similar thing, right? How do we help security organizations such that we enable the organization to go and deliver and work on what they need to do, as opposed to go and try to, quote unquote, punish everybody who misbehave, and things like that. I think there are some times where, as an industry, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit when we kind of have this kind of gotcha mentality. But I think this is something we need to get beyond and get over with.
So Yaron, this has been an amazing conversation. I know you and I could probably speak for hours and upon hours of the role of CISO and programming and security. But thank you so much for taking your time to come and speak to our podcast community. And I really appreciate you coming and doing this.
You're very welcome, Chris. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, happy to be back anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today on Secrets of AppSec Champions. If you found today's information valuable, hit that subscribe button on your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's episode. Ratings and reviews are like gold for us, so if you're feeling generous, please leave us a kind word as it helps others find our show. Until next time, take care.